On the day of my 52nd birthday, my husband brought a special guest, his lover, 25 years younger than me. She was wearing the diamond necklace that once belonged to my grandmother, the same one he claimed he had to sell 10 years ago to pay off the mortgage. With a radiant smile, he said, "I thought this was the perfect moment for you two to meet. Tomorrow, the divorce papers will be available with my lawyer. I won't be available, as I'm leaving for a trip around the world with my true love." I couldn't help but laugh, because just days before, he had no idea that I had already won the divorce game. The look on Richard's face when I laughed was priceless. For a moment, his triumphant smile faltered. His girlfriend, I believe her name was Amber, shifted uncomfortably next to him, her hand instinctively touching my grandmother's diamond necklace. The diamonds caught the light from my dining room chandelier, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls of the home I had decorated over our 30 years of marriage. "What's so funny, Elizabeth?" Richard's voice carried that familiar edge, the one that usually made me retreat into silence. "Not today." "Nothing, darling. Please, both of you, take a seat. The birthday cake is still on the table." I gestured to the untouched chocolate cake I'd baked that morning, complete with unlit candles. "Since you've made this a celebration of sorts, we might as well do it properly." I moved around the kitchen with deliberate calm, pulling plates from the cabinet while memories flooded through me. How many birthdays had I spent in this kitchen, preparing celebrations for Richard and our children? How many times had I pushed down my own disappointment when he'd forgotten my special day or showed up late with a hastily purchased gift? Amber sat down reluctantly, her youth and beauty undeniable. She couldn't have been older than 27. I recognized her type immediately. I'd once been her, 3 decades ago. Young, impressionable, believing in Richard's promises and charm, believing she was special. "So how long has this been going on?" I asked, slicing the cake with steady hands. Richard cleared his throat. "Elizabeth, there's no need to make this difficult. These things happen. People grow apart. That's not what I asked." I placed a slice of cake in front of Amber, who couldn't meet my eyes. "The necklace is beautiful on you, dear. Did Richard tell you its history? How it survived 2 world wars and traveled across an ocean with my grandmother when she fled Europe?" She began, but Richard cut her off. "The past doesn't matter anymore, Elizabeth. What matters is the future. My lawyer will call you tomorrow. I've been more than generous in the settlement." I nodded, taking my time as I cut another slice of cake. "You know, Richard, after 30 years of marriage, I've learned a lot about you. Your habits, your patterns." I slid the cake toward him. "Like how you always hide things in the same places." His face paled slightly. "Or how you use the same passwords for everything, our children's birthdays combined. Or how you still keep your important documents in that false bottom drawer in your office." "You went through my things?" His voice rose, anger replacing his previous satisfaction. "No, Richard. Not recently." I took a bite of cake, savoring the rich chocolate. "I didn't need to. You haven't changed in 30 years. Why would you change now?" He pushed away from the table. "We're leaving. This was clearly a mistake. Before you go," I said calmly, "you might want to check your email, or your bank accounts, or perhaps call your lawyer first." The uncertainty in his eyes gave me more satisfaction than I'd felt in years. Amber looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "What did you do?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're worried about. Unlike you." I smiled again, the weight of years of silent suffering lifting from my shoulders. "Did you really think I didn't know about the accounts in the Cayman Islands? Or the properties in your brother's name? Or the way you've been systematically hiding our assets for years?" Richard's face turned from pale to ashen. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check your phone, Richard. Because while you were planning your grand reveal today, thinking you'd leave me broke and humiliated, I was having some very interesting conversations with forensic accountants and my own lawyer." His hand trembled as he reached for his phone. As he scrolled through his messages, I watched the realization dawn on him. Everything he thought he had hidden was now exposed. "This isn't over," he hissed, grabbing Amber's arm. I looked directly at the young woman. "The necklace looks lovely on you, but I'm afraid it's stolen property. My lawyer has already filed a police report." Amber's hand flew to her throat. "Richard told me it was a gift from his mother. Richard has told a lot of people a lot of things over the years. I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my 52 years, and yet somehow stronger than I'd felt in decades. You can keep it for now, consider it a loan. But unlike my husband, I intend to get back what's rightfully mine. As they hurried toward the door, I called after them. Oh, and Richard? I've already changed the locks. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay tonight. The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in my dining room. I glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror, noticing the silver strands in my auburn hair, the lines around my eyes that told stories of both laughter and tears. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman looking back at me. I blew out my birthday candles alone and made a wish, not for revenge, but for the strength to embrace this unexpected new chapter of my life. I thought my birthday revelation was the end of my story, but as I would soon discover, it was only the beginning. Because what Richard didn't know was that I had found something else hidden among his secret files, something that would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about our marriage, and someone else was looking for it too. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. When I opened it, the man standing there was a stranger to me, but the fear in his eyes suggested he knew exactly who I was. "Are you Elizabeth Harmon?" he asked, his voice tight with urgency. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "We need to talk," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "It's about your husband, and if what I suspect is true, you might be in serious danger." "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let the stranger enter. My instincts told me to be cautious, but something in his eyes, a genuine fear, made me trust him enough to hear what he had to say. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of tan that suggested he worked outdoors. As he stepped into my foyer, he glanced at the birthday cake still sitting on the dining table. "I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration," he said. "Trust me, it was already interrupted." I gestured toward the living room. "Please, sit down." "And you are?" "David Mercer." He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly together. "I worked with your husband at Reynolds Financial for the past 5 years. I'd heard Richard mention the name before, but couldn't recall ever meeting David. Richard had always kept his work life separate from our home life, claiming it was his domain, and I wouldn't understand it anyway. I assume you're not here on behalf of my husband," I said, taking a seat across from him. David exhaled heavily. "No. In fact, Richard has no idea I'm here. If he did—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Mrs. Harmon, Elizabeth, please. Elizabeth. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was urgent. I've been noticing some irregularities at work, things that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was just administrative errors, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized Richard was systematically moving client funds through various accounts. I felt a cold sensation in the pit of my stomach. What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I know." David leaned forward. "I gathered evidence, planning to confront Richard privately before taking it to our superiors. But then last week, I noticed someone had been in my home office. Nothing was taken, but things were moved slightly. And 2 days ago, my car was tampered with. The brake line nearly severed. Are you saying Richard tried to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't have proof it was him, but the timing is suspicious. And now I'm hearing rumors that he's planning to leave the country?" I nodded slowly. "He told me tonight he's going on a trip around the world with his girlfriend." David's face drained of color. "Then it's worse than I thought. Elizabeth, if he's leaving the country, it means he's planning to disappear with that money, and he'll need to tie up loose ends." "Like me," I whispered, the implications sinking in. "And me," David added grimly. "I came here tonight because I thought you should know, and because I thought perhaps—" He hesitated. "Perhaps we could help each other." My mind was reeling. The Richard I knew was selfish, narcissistic, and dishonest, but capable of violence. Then again, the Richard I thought I knew wouldn't have hidden our assets or lied about my grandmother's necklace either. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "For all I know, you could be working with Richard, trying to find out what I know. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. This contains evidence of everything I've found. Financial records, transfers, emails. I made a copy for you. He set it on the coffee table between us. I'm taking a huge risk coming here. If Richard finds out. I studied David's face, looking for any sign of deception. His eyes held nothing but exhaustion and fear. The same fear that was now coursing through me. All right, I said finally. Let's say I believe you. What do we do now? First, you need to be careful. Very careful. If Richard thinks you know about his financial activities on top of discovering his affair, you could be in danger. Do you have somewhere safe you can go tonight? I thought about it. My son Michael lived across the country with his wife and new baby. My daughter Emma was studying abroad in London. My closest friend Diane had moved to Florida last year. For years, Richard had subtly isolated me from friends and family, always finding reasons why we couldn't attend gatherings or host people at our home. I can go to a hotel, I said finally. David nodded. Good. Use cash, not credit cards. And don't tell anyone where you're staying. He stood up. I need to keep moving too. I've already stayed in one place too long. As he headed toward the door, I felt a sudden panic at being left alone with this new, terrifying knowledge. Wait, I called after him. How do I contact you if I need to? He handed me a plain business card with only a phone number written on it. Burner phone. I'll answer if I can. David, I said as he opened the door. Be careful. He gave me a grim smile. You too, Elizabeth. After he left, I stood in my entryway, feeling as if my life had suddenly tilted on its axis. Just hours ago, my biggest concern had been confronting Richard about his affair and the hidden assets. Now I was contemplating whether my husband of 30 years might actually wish me harm. I moved quickly, packing an overnight bag with essentials. As I gathered my clothes, my hand brushed against the false back of my jewelry drawer, my own hiding spot that Richard knew nothing about. Inside was a small velvet pouch containing my mother's wedding ring and a set of pearl earrings I'd set aside for Emma. On impulse, I reached for the small fireproof box at the back of my closet, where I kept important documents. Inside was our marriage certificate, the children's birth certificates, and, thankfully, my passport. I slipped it into my bag along with the USB drive David had given me. As I zipped up my suitcase, my phone rang. Richard's face flashed on the screen. My hand hovered over it, heart pounding. Should I answer and pretend everything was normal? Or ignore it and risk making him suspicious? I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a text message appeared. We need to talk. Coming back to the house. Be there in 20. My pulse quickened. I couldn't be here when he arrived. Grabbing my bag, I took one last look around the bedroom we'd shared for decades. So many memories in this room, both good and bad. The early years of passion. The middle years of comfort. The later years of growing distance as Richard spent more and more time working late. I rushed downstairs, grabbing my purse and car keys. As I stepped outside, the night air felt cool against my skin. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the distant sound of a dog barking breaking the silence. I was halfway to my car when headlights swept across the driveway. A sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled up, blocking my path. For a moment, I thought Richard had arrived early, perhaps in a rental after dropping Amber off somewhere. But when the driver's door opened, it wasn't my husband who stepped out. It was Amber. She looked different than she had earlier that evening. Gone was the smug confidence. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. The diamond necklace was no longer around her throat. Mrs. Harmon, she said, her voice breaking. Elizabeth, please, I need to talk to you. I don't have time for this, I replied, trying to move past her to my car. Richard will be here any minute. No, he won't. Her words stopped me cold. He's not coming here. That text was from me, using his phone. I stared at her, confusion mixing with suspicion. Why would you do that? Because I needed to see you alone. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. Richard doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out. The similarity to David's warning earlier sent a chill through me. Let me guess, I said, my voice harder than I intended. You're in danger too? Amber's eyes widened. You know? Someone else told you? Before I could respond, the sound of a car engine roaring to life echoed from several houses down. Headlights appeared at the end of the street. "Please," Amber begged, grabbing my arm. "That might be him. He has trackers on both our phones. I left mine at the hotel to buy us some time, but if he checks and sees his phone is here..." Against my better judgment, I made a split-second decision. "Get in my car, now." We both jumped into my sedan. I threw my bag into the back seat and started the engine, backing out of the driveway just as the approaching car turned onto our street. As we drove past, I caught a glimpse of Richard behind the wheel, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't appear to notice us. My car was common enough, and we had our lights off. "Where are we going?" Amber asked, her voice small in the darkness of the car. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Away from here. Somewhere we can talk." I glanced at her, this young woman who had been flaunting her relationship with my husband just hours before. "You have a lot of explaining to do." "I know," she whispered. "And there's something else you should know too." She hesitated, then added, "Richard wasn't just lying to you all these years. He was lying to me too. And what I found out today, it changes everything." "What did you find out?" I asked, turning onto the main road that would take us out of our neighborhood. Amber opened her purse and pulled out a folded document. This fell out of his jacket when he was in the shower. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but then I saw the dates and the names. I kept my eyes on the road, but could feel her watching me carefully. "Elizabeth," she said quietly, "have you ever heard the name Claire Donovan?" The name hit me like a physical blow. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as memories from the beginning of my marriage came flooding back. Memories I'd tried for decades to forget. "Yes," I said, my voice barely audible. "I've heard that name before." "Then you need to see this," Amber insisted, holding out the document. "Because according to this, Claire Donovan isn't dead like Richard told you. She's very much alive, and she's been receiving monthly payments from him for the past 28 years. I drove in silence, my mind racing faster than the car speeding down the empty highway. Claire Donovan. A name I hadn't heard spoken aloud in almost 30 years. A ghost from the earliest days of my marriage that Richard had convinced me was laid to rest. "Pull over somewhere safe," I finally said to Amber. "I need to see that document." I found a 24-hour diner just off the highway, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. At this late hour, there were only 2 other cars in the parking lot. Safe enough, I thought. Anonymous enough. Inside, we slid into a booth far from the windows. A tired-looking waitress brought us coffee without being asked, then retreated behind the counter, seemingly uninterested in our presence. "Show me," I said, extending my hand across the table. Amber pulled out the folded paper and passed it to me. It was a bank statement, but not from any institution I recognized. The header showed an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, one of the accounts my forensic accountant had failed to discover. And there, listed among regular monthly transfers, was a name that sent a chill through me. Claire Donovan, receiving $5,000 every month for years. "Who is she?" Amber asked, watching my face carefully. I took a deep breath, the memories flooding back from a place I'd locked them away decades ago. Claire Donovan was Richard's executive assistant before we were married. They had an affair. I paused, the old pain surprisingly fresh. When I found out about it, Richard swore it was over. We were engaged and I believed him, or wanted to believe him. Then, about 2 months before our wedding, Claire supposedly died in a car accident. Amber's eyes widened. Supposedly? Richard was devastated, or so it seemed. He took a week off work, went to her funeral in her hometown. When he came back, he never mentioned her again. Told me it was too painful. I laughed bitterly. I spent years feeling guilty for being jealous of a dead woman. "But she's not dead," Amber said softly. "Apparently not." I stared at the paper in my hands, which means Richard has been lying to me from the very beginning of our marriage, before it even started. "That's not all," Amber said, reaching into her purse again. She pulled out a small flash drive. "I found this in his personal safe at the hotel. I only looked at a few files, but..." She hesitated. "There are photos of you. Recent ones. Outside your friend Diane's house in Florida. At your son's home with his baby. Places you've been over the past few months. My blood ran cold. He's been having me followed? Amber nodded. And there are notes about your schedule, your activities. Elizabeth, I think David was right to be concerned. You know David? I asked, surprised. No, but I overheard Richard on the phone last week. He was furious, saying someone named David was becoming a problem that needed to be handled. I didn't think much of it at the time, but she bit her lip. The way he said it scared me. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, seeking warmth as my body chilled with fear. So, what changed today? Why are you suddenly helping me instead of flaunting your relationship with my husband? Amber looked down, shame evident on her face. I'm not proud of my relationship with Richard. When I met him, he told me he was separated, going through a divorce. By the time I realized that wasn't true, I was... She trailed off. In love with him. I finished, not unkindly. How well I understood that feeling. Or what I thought was love. She corrected. But today, at your house, when he mentioned leaving the country, something in his eyes changed when you challenged him. It was cold, calculating. Then later, at the hotel, I overheard him on the phone with someone, discussing cleaning up loose ends before departure. He specifically mentioned you. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. Elizabeth, I've had a bad feeling for weeks now. Little things that didn't add up. The way he'd get secret phone calls. His insistence that I never touch his private laptop or go through his belongings. But I ignored my instincts because I wanted to believe he was the man he pretended to be. I knew exactly what she meant. Hadn't I spent 30 years doing the same thing? When I found that bank statement and saw those photos of you being followed, I knew I couldn't be part of this anymore. Whatever Richard is planning, it's dangerous. And I think both of us are liabilities to him now. I nodded slowly, processing everything. We need to find Claire Donovan, I said finally. If she's alive and has been receiving payments all these years, she must know something important. There's an address on the bank statements, Amber pointed out. It's in Millfield, about 3 hours from here. I remembered Millfield, a small town where Claire had grown up, according to Richard. The place where he claimed to have attended her funeral. Just then, both of our phones buzzed simultaneously. We looked at each other in alarm before checking the screens. It was a text message from Richard, sent to both of us. I know you're together. This little alliance won't help either of you. Turn back now, and we can still work this out. How did he know? Amber whispered, panic in her voice. I thought quickly. My car must have a tracker too. We need to ditch it. I stood up abruptly. Come on, we can't stay here. We left money on the table and hurried out the back door of the diner. The night had grown colder, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me as we crossed the parking lot. What now? Amber asked. Bus station, I decided. It's about a mile from here. We'll walk. As we made our way along the dark road, I found myself in the strangest of situations, allied with my husband's mistress. Both of us fleeing from the man who had deceived us in different ways. I'm sorry, Amber said suddenly as we walked. About the necklace. About everything. The necklace was just a symbol, I replied. One of many things Richard took from me over the years. He told me it belonged to his mother, she said. I had no idea it was your family heirloom. I wasn't surprised. Richard had always been skilled at crafting convenient lies. Did he tell you about his business? What he really does at Reynolds Financial? Amber shook her head. Not much. Just that he manages investments for wealthy clients. Is that not true either? Oh, it's true as far as it goes. But David seems to think there's more to it. I briefed her on David's visit and his suspicions about Richard moving client funds. That would explain why he's been so anxious to leave the country, Amber said. But what does Claire Donovan have to do with it? I don't know, I admitted. But 30 years of monthly payments suggests she has significant leverage over him. Knowledge of something he doesn't want revealed. We reached the bus station just before midnight. The fluorescent lighting made everything look harsh and uninviting, but it was our best chance to disappear. I purchased 2 tickets to a town 30 miles from Millfield using cash. We would need to find alternative transportation for the final leg of the journey. but it was safer than going directly to our destination. As we waited for our bus, I studied Amber more carefully. Without the confidence she'd displayed in my dining room earlier, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Just a woman who had made the mistake of trusting the wrong man. A mistake I was all too familiar with. "Why did he choose today?" I asked suddenly. "My birthday, of all days, to introduce you and announce the divorce?" Amber looked uncomfortable. "He said it was poetic justice, that you had always used your birthday to make him feel guilty about something that happened a long time ago." I frowned, trying to understand. What could that possibly? And then it hit me. My birthday, 30 years ago. The day I had confronted Richard about his affair with Claire, after finding incriminating messages on his pager. The day he had sworn it was over, promised he would never lie to me again. The beginning of a lifetime of deception. "Our bus is here," Amber said, interrupting my thoughts. As we boarded, I noticed a black SUV pulling into the bus station parking lot. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of the driver. It wasn't Richard, but I recognized the man as someone who worked with him occasionally. One of his fixers, as Richard called them. "Keep your head down," I whispered to Amber as we found seats at the back of the nearly empty bus. "We're being followed." The bus pulled away just as the man entered the station. Through the rear window, I watched him scanning the waiting area, his hand inside his jacket in a way that made my heart race. "What do we do now?" Amber whispered, fear evident in her voice. "We stay on this bus until the last stop," I decided. "Then we find another way to Millfield. We need to reach Claire Donovan before Richard realizes where we're headed." As the bus merged onto the highway, I found myself filled with a strange mix of terror and determination. For 30 years, I had lived in the shadow of Richard's lies, gradually shrinking myself to fit the space he allowed me. Now, with each mile that took me further from the life I had known, I felt something unexpected stirring within me, a strength I had forgotten I possessed. "Elizabeth," Amber said quietly beside me, "there's something else you should know. Something I found on the flash drive that I didn't mention earlier." My stomach tightened with apprehension. "What is it?" "There were medical records," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the bus engine. "Recent ones. Richard has terminal pancreatic cancer. He has less than 6 months to live." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not because I felt grief for the man who had betrayed me, but because it suddenly made his desperate actions make sense. He's not just running away, I realized aloud. He's trying to tie up every loose end before he dies. And we're those loose ends. As Amber nodded grimly beside me, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from an unknown number. "Elizabeth, it's David. I've been compromised. Richard knows I talked to you. Whatever you do, don't go to the police. He has people inside. I'm going off-grid. There's only one person who can help us now, and you're not going to like who it is." I stared at David's cryptic message, my mind racing. Who could he possibly be referring to? And how had everything unraveled so quickly? Just yesterday, I was preparing for a quiet birthday celebration, expecting Richard to forget as he usually did. Now I was on a bus in the middle of the night with my husband's mistress, fleeing from a man I'd spent 3 decades with but apparently never truly known. "What does it say?" Amber asked, peering over my shoulder. I showed her the message. "I need to respond. Find out who he means." "Who is it?" I texted back. The reply came almost instantly. "Claire Donovan. She's expecting you both. Go directly to her when you reach Millfield. 1423 Cypress Lane. Be careful. I'll contact you when I can." I showed Amber the message, watching her expression change from confusion to determination. "So our plan is still the same," she said. "Find Claire Donovan." "Yes, but now we know she's expecting us." I tried to make sense of it all. "Which means David has contacted her. Which means they've been in touch," Amber finished my thought. "David and Claire must have some connection we don't know about." The bus rumbled through the night, passing small towns and stretches of darkness. I watched the shadows play across Amber's face as she dozed fitfully beside me. Despite everything, I felt a strange sympathy for her. She was young, younger than my own daughter, and caught in Richard's web just as I had been decades earlier. As the adrenaline of our escape began to fade, exhaustion settled into my bones. I leaned my head against the cool window, trying to organize my thoughts. Richard was dying. The revelation should have moved me, but all I felt was a cold clarity. His illness explained the urgency, the reckless desperation of his recent actions. A man with nothing to lose was the most dangerous kind. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, Amber was gently shaking me awake. "Elizabeth, we're at the final stop." I blinked, disoriented. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over an unfamiliar town. The bus had emptied except for us and an elderly couple near the front. "Where are we?" I asked, gathering my bag. "Greenville," Amber replied. "About 20 miles from Millfield." We disembarked into the cool morning air. The bus station was small but busy with early commuters. "We need transportation," I said, scanning the area. "And we need to assume Richard is still tracking us somehow." Amber nodded. "I have some cash. We could take a taxi part of the way and walk the rest." It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option we had. We found a taxi willing to take us to a shopping center 10 miles down the road, then walked to a diner where we could regroup. Over coffee and a breakfast, neither of us had the appetite to eat. I studied the map on my phone. Millfield was a small town, easy to navigate. Cypress Lane appeared to be on the outskirts, near a lake. "What do you think she knows?" Amber asked quietly. "Claire, I don't know," I admitted. "But 30 years of payments suggests it's something significant. Something Richard couldn't afford to have revealed. Do you think it's connected to the financial issues David mentioned?" I considered this. Maybe. Or maybe it's something more personal. I traced the rim of my coffee cup, thinking. Richard and I were only dating for about 6 months before he proposed. His relationship with Claire preceded mine. Perhaps there's something from that time that he's been hiding all these years. Amber reached across the table and squeezed my hand, an unexpected gesture of solidarity that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "We'll figure it out," she said with conviction that belied her years. Together, we hitched a ride with a local florist making a delivery to Millfield, arriving at the town's main street by mid-morning. It was exactly as I had imagined from Richard's descriptions years ago. Quaint, picturesque, with a main street lined with small businesses and a town square dominated by an old courthouse. Following the map on my phone, we made our way toward Cypress Lane. The houses grew more spread out as we left the town center, with larger yards and more privacy. Eventually, we turned onto a narrow road that wound alongside the lake Richard had once mentioned, the lake where Claire had supposedly lost control of her car and drowned. 14-23. Cypress Lane was a modest blue house set back from the road, with a large willow tree in the front yard and a view of the lake from the back. A well-tended garden wrapped around the porch, and wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. "This is it," I said, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. We walked up the path and I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the wood, the door swung open. The woman who stood there was about my age, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had piercing blue eyes that assessed us quickly, and I could see the ghost of the young woman Richard had once described, the brilliant, ambitious assistant he'd claimed to love before me. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice lower than I'd imagined. "And you must be Amber. David said you'd be coming." She stepped back. "Please, come in. We don't have much time." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with bookshelves lining the walls and large windows overlooking the lake. Claire led us to a sunny kitchen where 3 mugs of coffee waited on the table. "You've been expecting us," I said, the surrealism of the situation washing over me. "For 30 years, in a way," Claire replied, gesturing for us to sit. "Though I didn't know it would be today until David called last night." I studied her face, searching for resemblance to the few photos I'd seen of her long ago. "Richard told me you were dead, that you drowned in that lake." Claire's lips curved in a humorless smile. "Richard has told a lot of lies over the years. That was just the first of many where you're concerned." "But why?" I asked. "Why fake your death? Why the monthly payments all these years?" Claire sighed deeply, folding her hands on the table. "Because Richard and I made a deal. He paid me to disappear, to start a new life far away from him, and the truth he couldn't afford to have revealed. What truth? Amber asked, leaning forward intently. Claire's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. Richard isn't who either of you think he is. His real name isn't even Richard Harmon. My world tilted sideways. What are you talking about? The man you married is James Blackwood. Before he became Richard Harmon, he was being investigated for financial fraud at his previous firm. He was looking at serious prison time. Claire took a sip of her coffee. I discovered evidence of what he'd done. Instead of turning him in, I helped him create a new identity. In exchange, he set me up with a new life here and promised to support me financially. But why would you help him? I asked, struggling to process this revelation. Claire's expression softened with an old sadness. Because I was young and foolish and thought I was in love. And because... She hesitated. Because I was pregnant with his child. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath me. You had Richard's baby, I whispered. Claire nodded. A daughter. Emily. She's 29 now, living in Seattle. She believes her father died before she was born. My mind was reeling. Richard, or James, had a daughter he'd never acknowledged. A daughter nearly the same age as our own. Does she know anything about him? Amber asked. No, Claire said firmly. And I want to keep it that way. Emily has a good life. She doesn't need to know the truth about her father. I was about to ask another question when Claire's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening. It's David, she said, answering quickly. David, are you... She fell silent, listening. The color drained from her face. When? She asked tersely. Are you sure? Another pause. Understood. We'll be ready. She ended the call and looked at us, her eyes hard with urgency. Richard knows you're here. He's on his way to Millfield now. She stood abruptly. We need to leave. Immediately. How did he find us? Amber asked, panic edging her voice. David thinks he tracked your last text message exchange, Claire explained, already moving toward a closet where she pulled out a duffel bag. Richard has resources we can't imagine. People in law enforcement, in telecommunications. David says he's desperate now, feeling cornered. Because of the cancer, I said quietly. Claire paused, turning to face me. Cancer? Richard has cancer? I nodded. Terminal pancreatic. Less than 6 months, according to his medical records. Something flashed across Claire's face. Not sadness, but a grim understanding. Then he's more dangerous than ever. A dying man with secrets to protect has nothing to lose. She zipped the duffel bag and handed it to me. There's cash in here, and documents you'll need. David has arranged a safe house about 50 miles from here. What about you? I asked. I'll be right behind you. But first, there's something I need to show you. Something I've kept hidden for 30 years that will explain everything. She moved to a painting on the wall and swung it aside, revealing a small safe. The truth about who Richard really is, and what he did before he met either of us. As Claire dialed the combination, I heard a car approaching outside, tires crunching on gravel. We all froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Claire moved swiftly to the window, peering through the curtains. Her face went pale. It's too late, she whispered. He's here! The back door, Claire whispered urgently. Through the kitchen. She thrust a small USB drive into my hand. Everything's on here. His real identity, the fraud evidence, accounts overseas. It's why he's kept paying me all these years. We moved quickly through the house, Claire leading the way. I could hear car doors slamming outside, followed by footsteps on the front porch. The kitchen door led to a small deck overlooking the lake. A wooden path wound down to a dock where a small motorboat was moored. Take the boat, Claire instructed. Cross the lake to the state park on the other side. David will meet you at the ranger station. What about you? Amber asked. I'll stall him, Claire said firmly. He won't hurt me. I've made arrangements so that if anything happens to me, everything I know becomes public immediately. I hesitated. Claire, I can't let you face him alone. Her eyes met mine, and I saw in them a lifetime of regret and resolve. You're not responsible for my choices, Elizabeth. I helped create this situation 30 years ago. Let me help end it. The sound of pounding at the front door echoed through the house. Go, Claire urged. Now. Amber was already moving toward the dock. I gripped Claire's hand for a moment, a wordless acknowledgement passing between us. Two women whose lives had been irreversibly altered by the same man. As I turned to follow Amber, Claire called after me. Elizabeth, the combination to the safe is your birthday. He never forgot it, even after all these years. I didn't have time to process what that meant. The front door splintered open just as we reached the dock. Amber jumped into the boat, and I quickly untied the rope, following her in. The small engine sputtered to life, and we pushed away from the shore. Looking back at the house, I saw Claire standing calmly on the deck, watching us leave. Then Richard appeared behind her, another man at his side. Even from a distance, I could see the fury in his stance. Faster, Amber urged, her eyes wide with fear. I pushed the throttle forward and the boat surged across the glassy surface of the lake. The morning sun glinted off the water, creating a dreamlike quality to our escape. Behind us, I heard shouting, but the sound was quickly swallowed by distance and the purr of the engine. Do you think she'll be okay? Amber asked, clutching the side of the boat as we bounced over small waves. I don't know, I admitted. But Claire's survived 30 years of Richard's deception. She's stronger than we realize. The lake stretched before us, larger than it had appeared from shore. The state park Claire had mentioned was visible on the far side, its forested shoreline a green smudge in the distance. As we crossed the open water, I thought about everything I'd learned in the past 24 hours. My husband wasn't who I thought he was. Literally. My entire marriage had been built on a foundation of lies. And somewhere in Seattle, a young woman was living her life, never knowing that her father was Richard, that I was her stepmother, that our children were her half-siblings. What are you thinking? Amber asked, breaking into my thoughts. That I don't know who I am anymore, I replied honestly. If Richard isn't Richard, then who am I? Who have I been all these years? Amber's expression softened. You're Elizabeth. Maybe not Elizabeth Harmon, but everything else about you is real. Your strength, your resilience, your capacity to face the truth. Those are all real. Her words touched something deep within me. For decades, Richard had made me doubt myself, question my perceptions, shrink my presence to accommodate his lies. But the woman who had laughed in his face when he tried to blindside her with divorce, that was the real me. The woman who had prepared for his betrayal, who was now fleeing across a lake to protect evidence of his crimes. That was the real me, too. What will you do after this is over? I asked Amber. She stared out at the water, considering. Start over, I guess. Somewhere new. Somewhere he can't find me. She looked back at me. What about you? Before I could answer, a loud bang echoed across the lake. We both turned to see a second boat launching from Claire's dock, cutting through the water toward us. He's coming after us, Amber gasped. I pushed the throttle to its limit, but our small craft was no match for the powerful speedboat now pursuing us. Richard was at the wheel, his face a mask of determination, with his associate beside him. We can't outrun them, I said, quickly assessing our options. We need to reach shore before they catch up. The state park was still too far. I scanned the shoreline and spotted a small cove with a narrow beach about a quarter mile to our right. There, I said, turning the boat sharply. We'll have to go on foot. We beached the boat with a jarring thud, jumping out into ankle-deep water and scrambling up the rocky shore. Behind us, Richard's boat was closing in fast. The trees, I gasped, pointing to the dense forest that began just beyond the beach. If we can reach them, we might lose him. We ran across the sand, the duffel bag with Claire's evidence bouncing against my hip. Just as we reached the tree line, I heard Richard's boat reach the shore. His voice carried across the beach, cold and commanding. Elizabeth, stop right there! I didn't look back. Amber and I plunged into the forest, following what appeared to be a hiking trail. The thick canopy above cast the ground in dappled shadows, making it difficult to see clearly. We moved as quickly as we could, the sound of pursuit growing behind us. There's a road up ahead, Amber panted, pointing through a break in the trees. I can see cars. Hope surged through me. If we could reach a public area, Richard would have to back off. He couldn't afford witnesses to whatever he planned to do. We emerged from the forest onto a scenic overlook. Several cars were parked in a small lot, and a family was unpacking picnic supplies from their SUV. Beyond them, I could see the ranger station Claire had mentioned. We must have looked a sight. 2 disheveled women bursting from the woods, one clutching a duffel bag. The family stared at us in surprise. "Are you ladies okay?" the father asked, frowning with concern. Before I could answer, Richard emerged from the trees behind us. He had composed himself, straightening his jacket and smoothing his hair. To any observer, he looked like a normal, respectable man, not someone who had spent decades living a lie. "Elizabeth," he called, his voice perfectly calm now, "you've misunderstood everything. Please, let's talk about this privately." The family looked between us, confusion evident on their faces. Richard approached slowly, a practiced smile on his lips. "Sir," he addressed the father, "I apologize for the disturbance. My wife isn't well. We've had a family emergency." I felt a familiar sensation washing over me. The doubt Richard had always been able to instill, the way he could make me question my own reality. But this time, I pushed back against it. I had evidence now. I had truth. "This man is not who he claims to be," I said clearly, looking directly at the family. "His name is James Blackwood, and he's wanted for fraud." Richard's face darkened for just a moment before he regained his composure. "Elizabeth, please. You're confused. Let me help you." He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. In that moment, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, followed by a familiar sedan. David emerged from the passenger seat, accompanied by 2 officers. Richard froze, his eyes darting between David and me, calculations running behind his eyes. "It's over, James," I said quietly, using his real name for the first time. "Claire sent everything to the authorities this morning, all of it." I saw the exact moment he realized he had lost. His shoulders sagged slightly, the facade cracking just enough for me to glimpse the desperate man beneath. As the officers approached, Richard turned to me one last time. "I did love you, Elizabeth. In my way." I looked at the man I had spent 30 years with, a stranger wearing the face of my husband. "I know," I said simply, "but love without truth isn't love at all." 6 months later, I stood on a beach in Maui, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The diamond necklace, my grandmother's necklace, gleamed at my throat, recovered from evidence after Richard's arrest. Richard had died 3 months after his conviction, his cancer progressing more rapidly than expected. In his final days, he had signed a full confession, perhaps seeking some form of absolution. Claire had contacted her daughter, Emily, finally telling her the truth about her father. The young woman had reached out to me, curious about the siblings she had never known. Next month, we would all meet for the first time. As for Amber, she had used her portion of the recovered assets to open a small art gallery in Portland. We still spoke occasionally, bound by the strange circumstances that had brought us together. The wind tugged at my hair as I watched the sun sink below the horizon. For the first time in decades, I felt truly free, not just from Richard's deception, but from the woman I had allowed myself to become in his shadow. I fingered the diamonds at my neck, feeling their weight and history. They had survived war, crossed oceans, and now represented not what was taken from me, but what I had reclaimed. My truth, my strength, my future. As darkness fell over the ocean, I made a silent promise to myself. From now on, I would live authentically, bravely. I would embrace this unexpected new chapter with all its uncertainty and possibility. This was not the ending I had expected for my story. It was something far better, a beginning.